The ferry here took us past the Indian island. As we left the shore, I observed a short, shabby, washerwoman-looking Indian, they commonly have the woebegone look of the girl that cried for spilt milk, just from upriver, land on the Old Town side near Grocery, and, drawing up his canoe, take out a bundle of skins in one hand and an empty keg or half-barrel in the other, and scramble up the bank with them. This picture will do to put before the Indian's history, that is, the history of his extinction. In 1837, there were 362 souls left of this tribe. The island seemed deserted today, yet I observed some new houses among the weather-stained ones, as if the tribe had still a design upon life, but generally they have a very shabby, forlorn, and cheerless look, being all backside and woodshed, not homesteads, even Indian homesteads, but instead of home or abroad steads, for their life is domi aut militiae, at home or at war, or rather now, venatus, that is, a hunting, and most of the latter. The church is the only trim-looking building, but that is not Abenaki. That was Rome's doings. Good Canadian it may be, but it is poor Indian. These were once a powerful tribe. Politics are all the rage with them now. I even thought that a row of wigwams with a dance of powwows and a prisoner tortured at the stake would be more respectable than this.
One of my favorite historic figures in Penobscot history is Joseph Attean. Sure, Joseph was Henry David Thoreau guide in 1853, but I want to move beyond that. I want to look at Joseph Attean and how his life embodies many aspects of our tribe's history. Joseph was born on Christmas Day in 1829. Our community has a long history of Christianity. This was introduced in the 17th century by black robes, Jesuit priests. In fact, St. Anne's Church on Indian Island is one of the oldest continually operating sites of worship in North America. Joseph died a hero in Maine history on the 4th of July in 1870. A very patriotic day to die. Our community has rich military tradition. Countless generations of Penobscot people have fought in wars for the United States of America. In fact, Penobscots have fought and died in every war in defense of this country since the birth of this country. Joseph was also a leader in the community. He was a chief of the Penobscot Nation. At the time of his office, however, this title was governor. The epitaph on his gravestone, located on Indian Island, reads, "In accordance with the customs of the tribe, he received the office of governor from his father, which office he held 7 years to the time of his death. A pure and upright man, he was much beloved and honored by the tribe and respected by all." In an account detailing the tragic death of Joseph Attean, author Fanny Hardy Ekstrom, a historian from Brewer, Maine, questions the authenticity of the inscription. She writes, "His epitaph is wrong in asserting that he received the office from his father, the title of governor. The office had been a lifelong office, hereditary in the Atean family, who were chiefs. But in Ekstrom's accounts, she points out that he was actually elected. Elected or received by hereditary. There is much confusion on the path taken by Attean to the highest office of the Penobscot nation. Atean's father was a chief up till his death. However, it was at that time the state of Maine imposed changes to our chief-making. The leadership of the Penobscot nation would be chosen by election. The confusion comes when Joseph Attean, the would-be chief of the hereditary system, runs for office and wins. Joseph Attean essentially becomes our first elected governor in our history and our last hereditary chief. The change to the system was due to political differences. Differences between the old party, who wanted the hereditary system, and a state-influenced new party. And the election didn't solve this. It just intensified those differences. In fact, in 1846, when Henry David Thoreau comes to Indian Island, he remarks, as he looks at the reservation, "They are all arranged with politics now." Above the epitaph, the entire gravestone reads, arched at the top, Joseph Attean, Governor of the Penobscot Tribe of Indians, son of John Atean, born December 25th, 1829, was drowned on the west branch of Penobscot River July 4th, 1870, at the age of 40 years, 7 months. 40 years old. His death has become part of a narrative that gets little attention in the annals of Maine history. However, Fanny Hardy Ekstrom, in her book The Penobscot Man, chronicles many deaths on log drives on the west branch of the Penobscot in the 19th century. This book is a stark contrast to the towering symbol of Paul Bunyan, which is in Bangor, Maine. Bangor, Maine was the lumber capital of the world when Thoreau visited. Her book shows us real men who may have less physical stature than Paul Bunyan, but are giants in bravery and integrity. Joseph Attean was one of the finest of these men, dying on the last drive of the season in 1870, dying a hero in Maine history. According to Fanny Hardy Ekstrom, and corroborated by newspaper accounts, the location of Attean's death was an area called Grand Falls, Blue Rock Pitch, and Island Falls, located on the Penobscot River's main channel between Shad Pond and Quakish Lake. This 4-mile portion of the river drops 112 feet from Quakish Lake to Shad Pond at the confluence with Millinocket Stream. Traveling up the river, canoeists would enter Shad Pond, essentially a bulge in the river created by the influx of Millinocket Stream from the north and Nolacemic Stream coming from the south. Here, native canoe route went up Millinocket Stream. By going up the stream, you could go all the way to Millinocket Lake and portage into Ambejijis, or you could traverse Millinocket just 2 miles and take a 2-mile portage to Quakish Lake. In 1820, Joseph Treat, surveying for the new state of Maine, traveled to the area with Lieutenant Governor, the Penobscot, John Neptune. He was second in command to Joseph Attean's father, John Atean. Treat and Neptune explored the main channel towards Grand Falls. We arrived at the pond at 11:30 and take a sketch of the pond from the mouth of Millinocket Stream, then proceeded up the pond and river to Grand Falls. Here we see nature's curious work. On each side is a bluff head of slate stone for several rods below the river, which appears to have been worn upstream, and the appearance of water wherein the rocks 20 feet above the level of the water. The rocks carved into shapes, large holes gutted and worn down. In 1846, on his way to climb Katahdin, Henry David Thoreau didn't go to the falls, but he mentions them. He writes, began to pole up Millinocket 2 miles to Elder Fowler's place in order to avoid the Grand Falls of the Penobscot. In a book authored by David Cook, Above the Gravel Bar, The Native Canoe Routes in Maine, Cook writes, the route up the West Branch went up Millinocket Stream to avoid the long and rough carry by Grand Falls on the Big River. The Fowler carry went from Millinocket Stream over into Quakish Lake and back to the West Branch above the falls. Understanding the landscape of the area and the routes employed by generations upon generations of indigenous people and early settlers help us understand the circumstances of Atean's death.
We are here on location at Grand Fish Falls on the West Branch of the Penobscot River. It was here on July 4th, 1870 that tragedy struck and 3 men were drowned, including Penobscot chief Joseph Attean.
Recently, we visited Grand Falls, the place described by Joseph Treat in 1820. This, however, is 200 years later. We hiked in to visit the place we had never seen. Well, I saw it the day prior as I flew over in an airplane. So I'd never seen this place in my whole life, and I saw it back to back, and they were quite different on each day. On this day, as we pass over Island Falls, you can see that there's an abundance of water in the channel. When we hiked in the following day, the rocks went from shore to shore with very little water in the stream. So as we come up around the corner here, this is where actual Grand Falls begins. It makes a serpentine route through the forest, and it cuts down further and further as it continues, making like a gorge near the end. When we went for this plane ride, we saw abundance of water flowing over the last pitch. However, when we went there the following day, there was only a small few ribbons of water going over this pitch. When the town of Millinocket was founded, it was founded around a paper mill. To generate power for the mill, the founders built a series of dams and canals. The stone dam on Quakish Lake created Ferguson Lake to the east. At the easternmost end of Ferguson, they dug a canal and underground tunnels to move the new head of water to generate power for the mill, which is situated on the shores of Millinocket Stream. Today, the water flows through these man-made structures and down Millinocket Stream, providing little water to the great series of falls below Quakish lake on the main stem of the Penobscot River. At the time of Atean's death, the dam at Quakish Lake didn't exist. It was created in 1899. Although the well-established portage was used almost exclusively rather than the channel, you cannot portage a log drive. That team of logmen on that July 4th had to deal with the difficult part of the river. What were the circumstances around Joseph's death? According to Exstorm, the water was very rough that morning. On a falling, driving pitch, it is always roughest. There was that crowning current heaped up in the middle that would push boats up on the shore. There were the log jams making the channels narrow and crooked, and there were the rocks, not less cruel because cushioned with great boils of water. Very tough conditions for even the finest boatmen, and the crew on this Independence Day holiday was short-handed. Stephen Stanislaus, a Penobscot and a great bowman, was Atean's equal in size and weight. With Atean at the stern and Stanislaus at the bow, they were considered the best boatmen on the river. An inexperienced Charles Prouty replaced Stanislaus in the bow. Some blamed Prouty for the death on that day, but other conditions contributed. The boat, when they shoved off above Blue Rock Pitch, was overloaded with men. Usually no more than 4 would be aboard for such a tricky part of the river. They had 7. Prouty was unable to point the bateau downstream, and they struck a rock broadside. According to Exstorm, one thing everybody knows, there are men in that boat who could not swim. The others leaped and swam. These, the non-swimmers, clung to the boat, and Joe Attean stayed with them. Not clinging as they did, buried in water, not crouching and abject, waiting for death that faced him, not a coward now, never, but paddle in hand, standing astride his sunken boat, a big cocked foot put on each gunwale, working the last ounce. The last one sees of Joseph Attean, standing high in the stern of his boat, dying with and for his men. 3 men died on that 4th of July. Edward Connolly, a white man, and 2 Penobscots. Stephen Tomar died along with his tribe mate, Joseph Attean. The body of Edward Connolly had been picked up above the falls several days before, but the 2 Indians they found together in Shad Pond on Sunday, the 6th day, July 10th. They took both the bodies ashore, and where they landed, they cut a deep cross into the tree. And because they could not treat lightly anything which had belonged to so brave a man, Joseph Attean's boots, they hung upon a limb of the tree. There the river drivers left them till they wasted away. A strange but sincere memorial to a good man. Welcome to Indian Island, home of the Penobscot Nation. This image here is the sign that welcomes visitors to our community. Alnabe Menahan is the Penobscot word for Indian Island, and it means the People's Island. The image on the left of the sign is a kinship group, 3 generations of family, and surrounding them, animals representing the 23 known clans of the tribe. A double curve representing any clan or family that have died out or are lost to history. Flying over Old Town, Maine, we approach the bridge to Indian Island. We can see the Milford Dam, which is the last dam on the river. 2 lower dams were removed as part of the Penobscot River Restoration Trust. Indian Island is our primary community today. It is the southernmost island in the reservation system and is home to the tribal government. The Penobscot elect the chief, vice chief, with 4-year terms, and a 12-member council with 4-year terms staggered every 2 years. The tribal government includes public safety, tribal court, natural resources, trust services, human services, housing, culture and history, and a health clinic. Youth and elders are important populations. The tribe has elder housing, elder meal site, and an 8-bed nursing home. The youth enjoyed a daycare, youth programs, a teen center, and a K-8 school, started in the late 1870s by the Sisters of Mercy. Most adults in our community had nuns for teachers. The population of the tribe is approximately 2,600 souls. Between 500 and 600 live on Indian Island, and 85% of the total population live within a 50-mile radius of the island. The Treaty of 1818 with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts defined our reservation land. From Old Town to Nicketow Island, we have 220-plus islands in the Penobscot River that is part of our reservation system. Just north of Indian Island is the largest, Orson Island. Through the Land Claim Settlement Act of 1980, however, the tribe bought more land, totaling more than 150,000 acres in trust and fee lands, which is dotted across the state of Maine. As we fly by the channel known as the Long Sandy River, we fly north. From here, we will visit some upriver islands and share some history. The Penobscot Nation belongs to the Wabanaki Confederacy. This confederacy includes Maliseet, Micmac, Passamaquoddy, and Penobscot nations. The term Wabanaki means people of the dawn. This island is culturally called Long Island for obvious reasons. However, this was called White Squaw Island historically until the word squaw was removed from public places in Maine due to its disparaging nature towards Indian women. This legislation was introduced by Penobscot legislative representative at the time, Donna Loring. Today, Donna Loring serves as Maine's senior advisor on tribal affairs, working closely with Governor Mills. The line of dotted structures below are log booms. In the era of the log drive on the Penobscot River, logging companies built these structures to corral logs until they could send them down to the sawmills. These companies leased the ability to connect the booms to the reservation islands. This money didn't go directly to the tribe. The funds went to the state coffers. The state assumed control over the tribes in Maine. To understand Penobscot Nation history, you must understand Penobscot's sense of place. Place nomenclature, or place names, give us a window into how our ancestors saw the past. Place names give us information, often a geographic or geologic description. These are often used as travel markers. Others are natural resource based. Places like Hemlock Island or Birch Island tell us about the resources that are there. Sometimes they're even land use. Names like place where we speared sturgeon by torchlight or place where we tanned hides. And often They're tied to oral traditions and are embedded in the landscape, geolocated. James Francis at the Cultural and Historic Preservation Department of the Penobscot Nation has been studying place names for many years, and we are now on our fourth generation of maps outlining how our ancestors saw the landscape. This landscape they're flying now has places in it like Hemlock Island, Sugar Island, which is named for the sugar plum, which is a berry of the serviceberry bush. And sometimes serviceberry bushes are known as shad bush because they are in bloom when the shad are running. Oleman Island is the second largest island within the reservation system. This island contained a vibrant Penobscot community into the 20th century. We have stories of houses being towed down the river in the wintertime on the ice taken to Indian Island. The term Old Lemon in Penobscot means red clay quarry and links us linguistically to our ancestors, the red paint people, who used this red clay, called hematite, during funerary ceremonies. In the spring, many Penobscot citizens harvest fiddleheads on the reservation islands, just as our ancestors have been doing for generations upon generations. The set of rips that we see below are called Passadumkeag rips. Passadumkeag is a place name that means above the gravel bar. Many places are interpreted from an upriver perspective. These rips are that gravel bar from the name. From a cultural standpoint, this is not just a gravel bar in the river that is downstream from the confluence of a major stream. It is an opportunity to fish. In 1820, when John Neptune guided Joseph Treat on a survey of Maine, they noted a zigzag structure spanning the river created with stones and sticks to assist in the harvesting of fish. These fishing weirs were often built in gravel bars. Passadumkeag was the site of an ancient village, and also the stream is an important canoe route to the east. The Lake of Nicotawas is within the watershed, and it means Little Fork in Penobscot. The two tines of this fork send travelers one of two places. One tine takes you to Nicotawas Lake and Casabias Lake on your way to Narraguagus and the Machias River systems. The second tine of the fork leads through a series of lakes leading to the St. Croix River.
My name is Chris Sockalexis, and I am the Penobscot Nation Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. Within this film, I'll be discussing significant archaeological sites and locations that are important within the cultural landscape of the Penobscot Nation. I'll be focusing on Mount Kineo in the Moosehead Lake region, Munsungan Lake region, the east branch of the Penobscot River, as well as the main stem. And I'll conclude with the Eric Hutchins collection, where a majority of the artifacts came from Passadumkeag Stream. The Moosehead Lake region, including Mount Kineo, is a significant site for archaeological materials. Our ancestors have been harvesting stone from what we know as the giant stone moose since time immemorial. This stone is highly significant and is found in the majority of archaeological sites throughout Maine as well as the Northeast. The rhyolite that is harvested from this mountain is easily worked and knapped to become spearheads, arrowheads, and other blade-like knives. The color of Mount Kineo rhyolite is distinct and very noticeable. When I flint knap, I prefer to use Mount Kineo as my ancestors did, traveling up there and harvesting this stone from the belly of the stone moose. According to ethnographer Frank Speck, Moosehead Lake region was the traditional hunting and fishing territories of the Sockalexis clan, my family clan, the Sturgeon clan. In 2014, I had the honor and privilege of being a part of the reenactment of Thoreau's 1857 canoe trip. At the base of the mountain, we camped at Harpscrabble Point, and I demonstrated the flint knapping style that my ancestors have used for centuries. Another significant source for the lithic material for making stone tools is Munsungan chert, which comes from the Munsungan Lake region north of the East Branch. This finely grained volcanic rock comes in various colors, from red that swirls into purples and greens from Munsungan Mountain to banded black and grays of Norway Bluff. Munsungan chert was heavily traveled and traded throughout the Northeast. You see it in many visible sites here in the Northeast, including New Brunswick, down into southern New England, and into New York. In 2016, President Obama signed the proclamation for the designation of the Katahdin Woods and Waters National Monument. At this time, the Penobscot Nation entered into a partnership with the National Park Service and the landowner, Elliottsville Foundation, to ensure that all cultural and historic sites within the National Monument would be protected. Collaborating with the National Park Service archaeologists, the Penobscot Tribal Historic Preservation Office conducted a series of archaeological surveys identifying culturally sensitive areas so they are not disturbed in any future infrastructure development. This partnership is consistent with the work I do on a daily basis. The majority of my work is Section 106 reviews. According to Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, any federally funded projects require tribal consultation to protect and/or mitigate culturally sensitive areas. During archaeological surveys working with the National Park Service, we encountered numerous artifacts within the East Branch of the Penobscot River. These artifacts include Canoe rhyolite bifaces, Traveler Mountain rhyolite drill, ground slate ulu knife, and two early styles of bifaces known as meadowwood, that's the early woodland period, and Brewerton, which is late archaic. So we're looking at a time range between 3,000 and 6,000 years before present. Another formation significant in the East Branch and Wasatiquet Stream area is what is known as the Wasatiquet Formation. This is a very fine-grained volcanic black stone which is easily worked and produces very fine edged blades. During the relicensing process of the Mattaseunk Dam, I had the opportunity to survey sites that have been submerged since the construction of the dam. An ancient terrace had formed as the water was lowered, revealing the original shorelines of the river. It was here that we found an abundance of groundstone tools. Unlike Canoe and Munsungan, which are stones that are flaked to make tools, groundstone tools are made through the process of grinding the stone into the desired tool forms. These tool forms include gouges, adze, and plummets. Many groundstone tools are typically used in woodworking. Large gouges were used, for instance, when making dugout canoes, the predecessor of the later birch bark canoe we are known for. Plummets are generally used to weigh down fishing nets. The adze was used for chopping wood. It is really impressive how sharp these tools can be. The polished bit ends of these tools resemble today's modern-day axes and chisels. In 2019, the Tribal Historic Preservation Office got a call from the Secretary of State, Matthew Dunlap. Matthew belonged to the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine, and that group was the executors of the estate of one of their members. Eric Hutchins wanted his belongings to benefit the Sportsmen's Alliance of Maine. Eric was an avid collector of artifacts. Throughout his life, he roamed the shores of the Penobscot River and its tributaries looking for ancient lithics. An anonymous donor offered to buy his extensive collection, well over 1,000 artifacts, that he collected throughout his life, consisting of arrowheads and other stolen tool forms found exclusively within the Penobscot River watershed. Consistent with his wishes, the anonymous donor gifted the collection to the Penobscot Nation Museum, where they are currently on exhibit today.
As we continue north, you can see the Piscataquis River, the largest tributary in the Penobscot system, coming in from the west. This is the town of Howland, Maine. Here at the mouth of the Piscataquis, we see the centuries-old Howland Dam, and just to the southwest of that, as we look at it, the Howland Bypass. The Howland Bypass is a man-made, nature-based fish bypass, and this was created as part of the Penobscot River Restoration Trust. For many years, this dam prevented spawning fish from accessing nearly 1,000 miles of habitat in the Piscataquis water basin. The bypass is 1,000 feet long and approximately 200 feet wide, and was officially dedicated on June 4th, 2016, marking the completion of a 16-year Penobscot River Restoration project. The restoration project removed 2 dams in the lower Penobscot. The Vesey Dam and the Great Works Dam were removed in 2013 and 2012, respectively. The power grid was supplemented for this hydroelectric power loss by increasing the capacity of the Stillwater branch. The Milford Dam got a fish elevator, and as we have already seen, the Piscataquis got a nature-based fish bypass. The West Enfield Dam had an existing effective fish passage. Many of our place names are travel markers. This travel was necessary for our seasonal migratory patterns, not a nomadic hand-to-mouth existence, but a sophisticated knowledge of vast areas of land. It was not, berry bush, we eat today. We knew where those berry bushes were, when the fruit was ripe, and the best way to get there. In the case of blueberries, we even knew to burn them to get greater yields the following year. Each family group would set off from the summer coastal gatherings and head upriver to their specific hunting and gathering territories. Here they would spend all fall gathering nuts, berries, and the men would hunt deer, moose, and bear, and a host of smaller game. Food would be prepared and stored for the upcoming winter. Spreading out over the landscape increases the landscape's ability to feed us all. It is important to note that one of our moons, which typically falls around February, is called the moon that provides a little food grudgingly. These were starving times, so preparation was vital in the fall. We even have a story of a flaming skeleton. A sasset is a representation of death to those who starve to death. In the spring, we would head to the fishing locations. Skowhegan means where we sit and wait. Wait for what? For the fish. In the summer, we would venture to the coast. The abundance of shellfish allowed larger groups to live in one area. The main coast is littered with shell middens. These were dump sites where we would throw our unused shells. This travel happened year after year, generation after generation, using the rivers, lakes, ponds, and streams as our highways. Our car was the birch bark canoe. As we continue upriver, we come to the mill town of Lincoln. In the river near Lincoln are the Mattanock Islands. In 1846, Henry David Thoreau visited these islands. Like Old Lemon Island, Passadumkeag, and Mattawamkeag, these islands held an important village into the historic era.
Learning that there were several wigwams here on one of the Indian islands, we left our horse and wagon and walked through the forest 1/2 mile to the river to procure a guide to the mountain. It was not till after considerable search that we discovered their habitations, small huts in a retired place where the scenery was unusually soft and beautiful, and the shore skirted with pleasant meadows and graceful elms. We paddled ourselves across to the island side in a canoe which we found on the shore. Near where we landed sat an Indian girl, 10 or 12 years old, on a rock in the water in the sun, washing and humming or moaning a song meanwhile. It was an Aboriginal strain.
On the island, Thoreau made arrangements to meet with Louis Neptune in Mattawamkeag upriver in a couple of days. Thoreau would leave with some lumbermen before Lewis could rendezvous with him. In 1853, after Henry David Thoreau's trip to Chesuncook, where he went on a moose hunt, he visited Indian Island. After meeting with John Neptune, he stepped outside.
An Indian who was making canoes behind a house, looking up pleasantly from his work, for he knew my companion, said that his name was Old John Pennyweight. I made a faithful study of canoe building, and I thought that I should like to serve an apprenticeship at that trade for one season, going into the woods for bark with my boss, making the canoe there, and returning in it at last.
This small passage from the Maine woods was supplemented by journal entries. In his journals, Henry David Thoreau goes through 4 pages of describing in great detail the making of John Pennyweight's canoe. The making of the birch bark canoe is a success story in our cultural revitalization efforts in the Penobscot community. Beginning in the early 2000s, the tribe has hosted 6 birch bark canoe building classes. The men who participated in these classes went on to make their own canoes. In the Penobscot community, Nick Dow made one in his shed, and Butch Phillips made one alone and another with his sons. And many other Wabanaki folks went home to their communities and made more canoes. At the Penobscot Nation Museum, we have 2 old-style birch bark canoes. One of them was made by Joe Polis.
I'm Jennifer Neptune from the Penobscot Nation Museum. This canoe was built in the 1850s. We believe it was made by Joe Polis. You can tell from the style and from the dimensions of it. He was one of the last people here that were making canoes the traditional way. And also the measurements of this canoe measure exactly the measurements that Henry David Thoreau wrote down about the canoe that he used on his trip with Joe Polis.
It was 18¼ feet long by 2 feet 6½ inches wide in the middle, and 1 foot deep within, so I found by measurement, and I judged that it would weigh not far from 80 pounds. The Indian had recently made it himself, and its smallness was partly compensated for by its newness, as well as a stanchness and solidity, it being made of very thick bark and ribs. Polis wanted to sell us his canoe, said it would last 7 or 8 years, or with care perhaps 10, but we were not ready to buy it.
In 2014, 5 members of the Penobscot Nation represented Joe Polis's contribution to Henry David Thoreau's 1857 journey. This trip would later be penned as The Allagash and the East Branch. The reenactment was on the 150th anniversary of the publication of The Maine Woods. Penobscot cultural guide Jennifer Neptune remembers the Brown Islands.
It was really meaningful for me to start on the East Branch and paddle to Indian Island. That whole stretch of the river, it was amazing to paddle on it and to recognize the places where I knew that there used to be villages and places that people inhabited, and to know that history and to be able to paddle through there with other Penobscots was really special. My favorite place that we stayed was on Brown Islands, and it's just this set of really beautiful small islands that are filled with ferns and rare plants and beautiful magical place. The fiddlehead ferns had just unfurled and it was beautiful. It was also a place where had big sandy banks, and so the ground nuts were exposed. So when the water goes out in the spring, sometimes it will wash away some of the sand along the side, and ground nuts, which are little tubers that we harvest to eat, were there in abundance, and we were able to harvest those. I was able to teach people what they were and what they looked like, and we gathered enough that we were able to have a feed of those for a couple of nights.
I was one of the Thoreauic 8, so I was in right from the get-go all the way to the end. That was great to start here on the island with the whole, little smudging ceremony, and then to drive try to follow the old trail as best we could with the modern roads. To start out on Moosehead on the day we did start, I don't know if Chris mentioned it, but that was quite the breezy day. And then to paddle and portage all the way back and to pull off at the same boat landing where we start, that was pretty epic. The one defining moment from the trip, paddling out of Webster Stream onto Second Lake Metagamon, heading towards First Lake after a long day, to see the smoke from the fire at first and then hear Chris singing and drumming for us. That was quite the moment.
Just south of Mattawamkeag, Bamola Rock. According to Joseph Treat, this is a large rock of granite. On the south side, near the top, is a circular hole. The Indians say it has been their custom to place in this cavity, when the water is low, presents for Bamola, tobacco, pipes, jackknives, etc. And if they are not taken out, they have a bad season for hunting and fishing the next year, and if it is taken out, they have good luck in everything. The word Bamola in the Penobscot dictionary is defined as he flies along with great speed, whizzes by, hums past. Bamola in Mainwood's narratives is often described as having the head of a moose with antlers, the beak and wings and feet of an eagle, and the body of a man. It was made famous by Maurice Day. According to Andrew Dana of Penobscot, he looks much different. According to Reverend Joseph Blake in 1836, in an excursion to Katahdin, he says, by the Indians, the top of Katahdin was considered sacred. It was, in their belief, the abode of a powerful deity, Bamola by name, who they used to say would be angry if any person attempted to climb the mountain, and who would take the life of any red man found on the summit. Hence, at first, Indians, when employed as guides, refused to ascend the mountain. Thoreau wrote,
The tops of mountains are among the unfinished parts of the globe, whither it is a slight insult to the gods to climb and pry into their secrets and try their effect on our humanity. Only daring and insolent men, perchance, go there. Simple races, as savages, do not climb mountains. Their tops are sacred, and mysterious tracts never visited by them. Bamola is always angry with those who climb to the summit of Katahdin.
The Mattawamkeag River is the highway to the east from the Penobscot River to the St. Johns River Valley. Often called the Maliseet Trail, the Mattawamkeag River goes into Pascahegan Stream, into Grand Lake, and then portaging into the Eel River to the St. John. This is a major canoe route.
After dinner, we strolled down to the point formed by the junction of the two rivers, which is said to be the scene of an ancient battle between the Eastern Indians and the Mohawks, and searched there carefully for relics, though the men at the barroom had never heard of such things. But we found only some flakes of arrowhead stone, some points of arrowheads, one small leaden bullet, and some colored beads. The last should be referred perhaps to early fur trader days.
Henry David Thoreau spent most of his life collecting lithics. These stones would make their way to the Peabody Museum. In 2014, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer Chris Sockalexis and tribal historian James Francis went to the Peabody Museum at Harvard and digitized Thoreau's extensive collection. In his journal, Henry David Thoreau spoke extensively, poetically and philosophically about arrowheads and other such lithics. It is now high time to look for arrowheads. I spend many hours every spring gathering the crop which the melting snow and rain have washed bare. They are sown like a grain that is slow to germinate, broadcast over the earth like dragon's teeth which bore a crop of soldiers. These bear crops of philosophers and poets, and the same seed is just as good to plant it again. It is stone fruit. Each one yields me a thought. I came nearer to the maker of it than if I would have found his bones. It is humanity inscribed on the face of the earth.
The mud pond carry. Just seeing that depression and the height of land, that knowing that Penobscots have traveled back and forth for thousands of years using that. That was definitely the most influential part of it. I have a couple. I have the whole Moosehead Lake was, from start to finish, was pretty defining. 40 miles of open water paddling. And then coming down through would be Webster, the day we camped before entering Webster Stream. When it poured rain, and then watching the canoes emerge from the rain into the sun was pretty profound. And then the would be the middle part of Webster, looking like you're paddling downhill. Was pretty cool.
So our river tour ends with Nicketow, the last island in the reservation system. Nicketow means the fork between the East Branch and the West Branch. These branches of the river, the East Branch goes to the east and to the north of Mount Katahdin, and the West Branch to the south and to the west. They cradle the sacred mountain. You can see that in the distance. This is also a crossroads. This is where Thoreau met himself. In 1846, he went to the left going up the West Branch to climb Katahdin. And in 1857, came down from the East Branch to the right and on down the main branch of the river. But it's also a crossroad in time as we see Interstate 95 crossing the river. We have come full circle. With the fire crackling and the boys around it, the day became dark. Susip was tracing the outline of the arrowhead with his fingertip. Awasus looked at the arrowhead and reached for his sheath and took out a stone blade. The arrowhead and the blade had been from the cow moose. Grandfather had told them a story on the day he made the blade and arrowhead. The boys remembered how the shape appeared from the stones that Muckway had given Grandfather. Muckway needed a new paddle, and Father had just made one, and Muckway thanked him with those stones. They were black with small gray flecks. One night, Grandfather had struck those stones with another stone, and sharp pieces came away from the stone. The first strike sheared off a piece that landed near Susep. The second one, Grandfather motioned to Awasus and then struck the stone. Grandfather laughed as he saw The large, narrow piece of stone landed on the ground. Owasus picked it up and held it in his hand while Grandfather shaped the smaller stone for Susep. Grandfather pecked the stone with a piece of deer antler. Small flakes fell to the ground. The boys watched as an arrowhead was being formed. As Grandfather worked, he began telling a story. It was a story of Glooskap and how he taught people how to hunt. It was on the shores of a large lake that Glooskap and his party of hunters saw a cow moose and her calf emerge from the woods on the shore of the lake. He bent down to the ground and picked up a small, sharp stone. He affixed this to his stick, notched it in his bow, and shot the cow moose dead. She was as large as a mountain and fell to the shore, part of her body in the water. The party approached her to receive the gifts. However, when they went to cut the belly of the cow moose, all they found was stone. The entire cow moose had turned to stone. She was now a mountain of sheer rock. Grandfather looked up from the finished arrowhead and looked at the boys. The boys' eyes were wide with amazement and awe. He held up the finished arrowhead between two fingers. Susep looked intently at the point. Grandfather told the boys that the cow moose didn't turn into just any stone, but that stone that Glooskap had picked up and affixed to a stick. Her gift wasn't meat. Her gift was stone. Stone that was perfect for making arrowheads and other hunting tools. The boys knew that these were the stones that Mukway had brought. For Owasus, Grandfather didn't make an arrowhead. He had said that the stone will tell you what it wants to be, and Owasus' stone wanted to be a blade.
I shall now clean the earth of all obstacles, and shall also continue to make for you and your children all the tools of stone, until such time a power be given to you to make them yourselves. Now when you make the bow to shoot with, make an arrow also, and make it so that the end next toward the animal be pointed. You shall burn the end so that it shall be hard, and when you send it forth, it shall penetrate into the body, and the animal shall fall dead, so that you can prepare it for food.
In the spring of 2015, the Penobscot Nation joined others in an epic canoe journey that retraced Henry David Thoreau's journey with Joe Polis in 1857. Tribal Historic Preservation Officer Chris Sockalexis was one of the representatives from the Penobscot Nation to join the trip. The first day of the paddle, the length of Moosehead Lake, brought them just past the precipice known as Mount Canoe, just past the cow moose. While the evening meal was being prepared, Chris removed some stones from his bag and began flint-knapping them into arrowheads. The other participants watched as Chris chipped away at stones that had been harvested from the belly of the cow from Mount Canoe. Henry David Thoreau and Joe Polis had camped near Canoe in 1857. As they approached the sheer cliff mountain, Thoreau wrote, "While we were crossing this bay, where Mount Canoe rose dark before us, within 2 or 3 miles, the Indian repeated the tradition respecting this mountain's having anciently been a cow moose. Often stories from the past can seem fantastic and supernatural, but these stories persist through time for very important reasons. Within many stories are clues on how to live, where to travel, or where to find resources. This story is about resources. The cow turning into stone seems fantastic and supernatural. However, the cow doesn't turn into just any stone. The cow becomes a mountain of the same stone that Gluskap picked up off the ground and shot from his bow, killing the moose. She became a massive stone, perfect for making arrowheads. The story of Gluskap and the moose is a tale embedded in the landscape, and it is bound geographically. People who knew the story knew the location and the importance of the resources at that location. Canoe became a quarry for stone sought after by indigenous cultures, paddling there from hundreds of miles in any direction. The point of the part of the story is not the hunt for the moose, but the resource materials needed to kill the moose and the location of that material. The participants watching Chris create an arrowhead became spectators to a tradition that stretches back thousands of years. The fact that it was taking place in a space where generations of Penobscot people had done the same activity connected Chris and the spectators back through time and to his Penobscot ancestors. Each strike of the stone echoed through the fabric of time. For me, the best part of the trip was camp life. Don't get me wrong, I love being on the river, with the paddle in my hand. I think as a Penobscot, you don't feel any more at home than on the river in a canoe. I think Polis said it best. It makes no difference to me where I am. That in response to Thoreau's inquiry if he was glad to be home. But camp life? That's where we all came together, sitting around the campfire, listening to Thoreau scholars read from the Maine woods, hanging with friends new and old. That was great, making those connections. So the biggest takeaway from the 2000 trip was the connections we made on the trip. The connections with Mahusa Guide Service and New England Outdoor Center in particular paved the way for the Penobscot Cultural Tourism Program. Since 2015, our Cultural Tourism Program has hosted trips from Passadumkeag, through the Gravel Bar, past Oleman Island to Sugar Island. And on Sugar, we have done some renovations.
Since this Thoreau trip, yes. I have worked for the cultural department to do some major improvements on the island by rehabbing the cabins and helping to create a trail system, if you will, on Sugar Island.
We also had constructed a traditional wigwam and longhouse. This on a separate part of the island that we call the Ancient Village.
Really interesting feature to have out on there where people can experience what our houses, what our living situation was in the past with the wigwams. And it was really neat that you can see them as you come down river towards Sugar Island.
Clients spend from 2 to 4 days on Sugar Island learning about Penobscot sense of place, Penobscot history from James Eric Francis. They also learn about medicinal plants and basket making from Jennifer Neptune.
I've helped with the Penobscot Nation Cultural Tourism Program. I'll paddle with people, and I also do plant walks and teach people about the plants. And I'm also a basket maker, and so I also do that with the guests, show them how to make a small basket, and we talk about black ash, brown ash, the tree that we use, and sweet grass to make those baskets, and, respecting those parts of our culture.
Clients also have the opportunity to hike on trails, relax, or paddle or pole a birch bark canoe.
The tribe's cultural tourism, I'm helping as one of the river guides. They get to paddle in a birch bark canoe. It's fun to see people take part in the culture.
In the evening, All the cultural guides join together and the clients are free to ask questions. We call it everything you ever wanted to know about Native Americans, but were afraid to ask. Then we wrap up the day with drumming and singing. On the last day, we paddle to Indian Island, where they get a community tour and a visit to the Penobscot Nation Museum. We've always had tourists come to our community, but this model ensures that we get more than just tourists. We have informed visitors. Beginning in 2020, the cultural tourism model is changing to a family-oriented trip. We have developed a Thoreau-specific trip that we are currently marketing to families. On behalf of the Penobscot Nation, thank you for watching. And thank you, Brian Wentzel, for the plane ride.
Yo